in the dark here. There's a transition. In the same room is mobile app versus mobile web. So here we go.
Okay. Angry Birds players. Oh, look at that. More than anybody else. Cool. So my last question today is, how many people are looking forward to happy hour? All right. Cool. All right. Let's put apps into context before I launch into my diatribe on apps versus web. A little bit of context here. In terms of downloads, we always talk about downloads. It's very exciting. It's a very big number. People like big things. Last year, about 8 billion downloads globally of apps. How about that? 8 billion, up from about nothing 3.5 years ago. Where it's estimated we're going to be at 50 billion downloads by the end of 2012. 30 billion downloads, give or take, according to Juniper, in terms of revenues. The interesting thing is, if you look at the revenue pictures, last year the Apple App Store did about $1.7 billion in revenues. 25% of that came from games. 47% of those games revenues came from in-application billing. So all you people who are purchasing Mighty Eagle and Angry Birds, thank you very much. Why is this going on autopilot? About 600,000 apps out there, just among the 3 top app stores in terms of volume. So obviously discovery is becoming a big issue. We're going to talk about that. Over 35% of users in the United States now use apps, according to Comscore research. That's up 2.5% from the latest reading in December. That's growing at on average 2 to 3% every month. 65.8 million Americans now using smartphones. Just to put that into context as well, last quarter, the fourth quarter of 2010, there were actually more smartphones sold than computer apps versus web. It doesn't make a difference for consumers. The consumers are asking ourselves a lot of different questions when they're looking at apps. Basic stuff. Is it going to work on my old phone? Does it work on a feature phone or a smartphone? What kind of phone do I have? What constitutes a smartphone? What kind of phone do I have? It sounds pretty obvious to many people in the room, but if you are a BlackBerry user and have had to take out the battery of your phone to figure out what kind of handset you have, you know the drill. What's the version of Android that I have? With so many cupcakes and cookies and different versions of the operating system coming out, obviously that adds complexity. And lastly, what the hell is HTML5, right? Especially if I asked my mother that, she'd probably think it's some sort of recipe or something. So, the reality is, when you look at the things side by side in terms of how they compare, there's a number of obvious differences in terms of pros and cons of how you compare apps versus web. Apps on the one hand are, in a way always on, right? Unless you have an app that requires connectivity. You can launch it in a plane, you don't necessarily have to be connected to the web. It's always there, you can access most of the functionality. You don't necessarily have to worry about connectivity. Furthermore, apps provide a deeper engagement than what you get traditionally on web. Obviously with HTML5 that's starting to change. We're starting to see HTML5 provide enhanced functionality on handsets. But generally speaking, the advantage of apps is you just get a deeper, richer experience. You can do some really wicked and cool things with that. You can leverage the accelerometer. You can use the microphone functionality on an iPhone. You can do a number of different things that currently you cannot do on web. Leveraging touch, another example, and leveraging the power of the device, right? So one thing is, no matter how powerful the web becomes, or how much better HTML5 becomes, the reality is that we live in an industry, in a world where basically the handset technology is advancing at a pace which is faster than the networks that they run on. That's just the simple fact. We're seeing new and different handsets and better and greater and faster technology coming on average every 3, 4, 6 months, whereas of course a network upgrade from 3G to 4G can take years. They're viral, and yes, very sexy. Whether it's Kim Kardashian or Angry Birds, definitely is a cool factor. But web has a number of advantages as well, and this is really important to keep in mind. The first is an obvious one. Last year, Apple sold somewhere around 47 million iPhones. Google sold somewhere around 50 to 52 million Android devices. So it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that that's about 100 million devices out of a total market of 1.1 billion devices sold last year, i.e. 10% share. So needless to say, if you want to reach all your consumers and you're working for somebody like Pepsi or Coke, native apps are not going to cut it in terms of reach. Second, and more importantly also, is the development cost. Right? The more operating systems you have, the more expensive the development. If you're really looking to do custom stuff and leveraging native APIs, then it becomes significantly more expensive. Keep in mind also that when you're doing apps, you have to upgrade and maintain all these apps. So every time you do an update, you've got to re-update all the apps across multiple different app stores and distribution centers. Ease of distribution. Web, you update once, it's basically updated across all the handsets that will access your website. And of course, the web, of course, since it instantly connects and updates, the downside, of course, of web is that it does require connectivity in many cases. Again, with HTML5, the advantage in some cases you can cache things, so you don't necessarily have to have that connectivity. But for more mundane mobile sites, you do.